Hey, welcome back to the channel. It has been a while since I just sat down and spoke to you guys. And by that I mean since I last did like a sit down video. I have been doing a lot of vlogs lately. I use a lot loosely. I have not been posting a lot of videos lately. I don't know if that's going to change or not. We're going to try a couple of different things. Try and get back into the swing of it. But also just continuing to be kind to myself and, not pushing myself, no pressure. So originally this was going to be a sort of like sit down, have a look through my statistics and kind of do a 2024 wrap up. But I've been putting that off because, guys, if I'm honest, 2024 wasn't a bad reading year, but it also wasn't a brilliant reading year. And I mean that in terms of, like, not looking at my spreadsheet, not looking at Storygraph, not even looking at my shelves, and just thinking back over 2024 as a whole, particularly in terms of my reading, and it was just kind of, it was okay, it was fine. And honestly, I feel like that's reflected in the channel and how little I have posted this year. Because although I read a decent amount, I mean, I think in terms of quantity, in terms of like the number of books I read, I was sort of like back up to my yearly average. So I think I read 67 books. Something along those lines. I struggle to have like so many of them jump out. And it's not to say it was a bad year. It definitely wasn't a bad year. It's just, it was a fine year. But I just don't want to reflect on it. I absolutely found a couple of like new favourite authors. I discovered Abby Jimenez. I think that's probably like my peak highlight. Abby Jimenez and Maria Zapata, two romance writers, which absolutely reflects that 2024 was definitely my romance era. Other than that, like, I feel like I don't have too much to say. I had at one point written up like a list of questions, almost like a tag video style, very much inspired by a lot of like the end of year tags and things. Because I was struggling to do sort of like a, here are my favourite books of the year. So I was like, okay, how about here's my favourite fantasy, here's my favourite romance, this is my favourite audiobook, etc. And honestly, I just kept coming up with a lot of the same names and it just felt so incredibly uninspired. And I didn't want to make a video that feels incredibly uninspired, because if I'm not super enthusiastic about it, it's gonna come across in the video. And I don't want that. I want my videos to be, happy and excited and engaging. So yeah, I kept putting off and putting off. It's now the 2nd of February, so especially in this sort of like last week, I'm like, God, I mean, if you're gonna do it, like, you really need to do one now. And then this weekend I was like, why? Why do I need to do a 2024 wrap up if I'm not feeling it? I don't. Because quite frankly, no one is begging me to do it. No one is forcing me to do it. And I think if folk are going to watch my video, they'd rather watch a video that I want to make rather than a video I'm feeling forced to make. Right? So beyond, I read 60-something books and I discovered Abby Jimenez and Mariana Zapata, and absolutely fell in love with them. Yeah, that's all you're getting. That was 2024. It was fine. My 2024 reading. It wasn't a bad year. It wasn't my best year. It's not going to be my favourite reading year. But it was a fine year. Then I was like, okay, 2025 goals. I did start a vlog for this. I started filming my I did start filming a vlog on New Year's Day, very similar to what I did last year. because I actually really liked the one I did last year. It was probably one of my favourite videos I made all year, barring my Hobbit video. But I might have chosen... I don't want to say I chose the wrong book to read on New Year's Day, because we'll get into it in a minute, but it was the best book. It was, I absolutely loved, like 6 out of 5 stars, the book that I picked for reading on New Year's Day, but I didn't finish it on New Year's Day. And realistically, for the video I wanted to make, I should have picked a book I could have finished in one day. But I did. I filmed like multiple updates throughout the day because, you know, I don't really celebrate New Year's Day with people. I really like quiet, cozy New Year's Days in. They're one of my favorite things to do. It's me and the cat. We will put whatever we want on TV in the background, and we'll just sit and read and make something nice for my dinner. And that's exactly what I did. The problem is I was going through it, and a lot of that was looking at sort of like breaking down like my 2025 goals and some of my 2024 wrap up. And although my book updates were fine, I was happy with those, everything else I was just kind of feeling really meh about, and I just wasn't jiving with it. And so yeah, that video is not going to see the light of day because I don't want it to. So yeah, so I'm going to very, very briefly right now go over my 2025 goals. And let's just say they are even nicer to myself than last year's ones were. So I've got 2 primary goals. Realistically, I've got 1 primary goal and 1, yeah, we can still make this happen, I think. So the main goal is that I really want to make a concentrated effort this year to read the books off of my physical TBR. That was my goal last year, and I failed drastically. Like, drastically. Last year I wanted my physical TBR to be sort of like sub, I can't remember if I said 150 or 160. I started off around about the 170. There's now over 200 books on it, because mostly because I went to Wigtown and I bought like 30 plus books. I did make a video about that, and I did post that, so you can go watch that one if you want. It's like 2 hours long, and it's me spending a week in our national book town. It was great. It was my absolute highlights of like my entire year, reading or otherwise. So yeah, this year I do want to make a concentrated effort to reading down my pile, my physical TBR. I have rearranged my bookshelves here, which I think I showed you guys in the last video. So I have 3 shelves, like this one, and the one below. Do not have any books on them. Well, this one has books I'm currently in progress / library books. So that's kind of like immediate in progress TBR, and then everything else is upstairs. But I'm hoping that having sort of like this space, and I really hate that there's no books on it now, will really inspire me to read, because now I have places to put them, and I think that was something that I was struggling with, was like if I take books from upstairs, where do I put them on the shelves? Not an issue anymore. And after that, just because it was really, really fun, I did it back in oh gosh, when did I do it? 2022, I think. I set myself the goal to read my height. So I want to do that again, just for the fun of it. I know that if I read approximately 60 books, that will be my height. But I think it will help me focus a bit more on, rather than being bogged down by a number, I'm not setting a physical number. So my Goodreads and my Fable, I have set my reading goal to 52, but that's literally just a number just because I like seeing the number tick up and up, and I like seeing the percentage tick up. But that's on average a book a week, and I definitely read more than that. But because I have set that goal for the last sort of like 2 years, something I have noticed is that last year I did not pick up a big book at all. There were no 500 plus page books last year. And I've got quite a few of them sitting upstairs because there's a lot of epic fantasy sitting upstairs. So I want to set the goal, instead of a number, I want to read my height again, because then a book this size, or, you know, 3 books that size, They still amount to the same. They still count just as much. So yeah, and I would like at least 50% of Reading My Height to come from my physical TBR. The remaining 50% will come from audiobooks that I will be continuing listening to, library books. I will continue supporting my library. I'm going to be continuing with the library book club. And, you know, I don't see the point in buying the book for the library book club unless I already own it, which chances are I won't. Because my library gets the book in specifically for us to read. So, yeah. That's it. That is, in a nutshell, and I say nutshell, that's in approximately 9 to 10 minutes. 2024 overview and what's happening in 2025. In terms of the channel, I'm not going to put myself on a schedule or anything. You will continue to get videos as and when I can be bothered. Continuing the trend, especially I've had in the last couple of months, videos will be filmed. I'm filming regularly. I'm just not editing and posting regularly. So you get them when you get them. There will probably start to be a bit more of a mix-up between vlogs and sit-down videos, because I think I was really enjoying doing vlogs, and then I just, that was all I was filming, and then I started, like I said, the last one just felt quite lackluster, and vlogs do take a lot longer to film. So there's going to be a bit more of a mix-up, and it means that if I'm filming a vlog about a bunch of books that I don't that I'm not particularly feeling enthusiastic about, then you're not going to get a lackluster vlog. Yeah. And I think what I might do is have... I'm still undecided if it's going to be a monthly wrap-up or just sort of like a recent reads. It's going to be essentially, this video, once I eventually get there, it is essentially going to be my January wrap-up, because... just cause. It just starting the year... The books I've read so far this year, it's just, there's like, I think there's five and a bit books I want to talk about, so it just feels nice, and I do kind of have this number of sort of like every 5 or so books chat to you guys, so I think sometimes it's going to be a monthly wrap up, sometimes it's just going to be here's the last 5 books I read, and it will be a mix up. Yeah, I think that's all in terms of updates and things. So, shall we start talking about some books instead of just me rambling on? Because here's the thing. I've just told you that 2024 was fine. It was fine. 2025? January, at least, has been more than fine. So much more than fine. So we're gonna talk about these. Okay, I've got them out in the order I read them, so I'm just gonna talk to you about them in the order I read them, and we'll go from there. So, the book that I started the year with was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I decided to start this because if my focus is reading my physical TBR, I thought, what is one of the books that has been sitting there for a decent length of time now, and that is kind of anticipated? It has to be Evelyn Hugo. I'm fairly certain way back in the early days of my channel, I think I put out like 12 books I want to read in 2022. This was on this list and I never got around to reading it. I think I still need to read the vast majority of what's on that list, so I might revisit that for inspiration and like chip away at that at some point this year, maybe. Thoughts for a vlog later on. This is also, with the exception of my Danmei, so with the exception of Heaven Official's Blessing and Husky and its White Cat Shizun, this is the highest rated book, according to Storygraph at the time of adding it to my spreadsheet, on my physical TBR. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it's like a solid 4.4 something. It's like, this is a really highly rated book. So I thought this is a really good one to start with. It was not a great one to start a vlog with because I was finding I was like reading a bit, put it down, digest. Wow, okay. Whew. So I'm fairly certain I want to say I only read up to about there-ish on New Year's Day. But wow, I am so incredibly glad that I actually picked this up because this book was wonderful. It has now been about a month, maybe a little less since I finished it, and I'm still thinking about it, and I'm fairly certain I'm going to continue thinking about this book all year. I don't know what my mood is going to be like. I don't know what my channel is going to look like at the end of 25. This is 20, yeah, at the end of 2025, start of 2026. So I don't know if I'm going to do like a yearly wrap up or a top 10 or top 5 books, whatever. If I do, I would not be surprised if this is on it and near the top, because wow. So I was a little bit nervous picking it up because, like I say, it's been on my TBR for a while now. But I needn't have been. So what is this about? This is the story of Evelyn Hugo as told by Evelyn Hugo. This is Evelyn, who was a reclusive Hollywood icon, Evelyn Hugo. She was a star of the big screen in the golden age era of Hollywood. So in the sort of like the 40s and the 50s. 40s, 50s? Yeah. From the 50s through to the 80s. She was one of the biggest names of her time. And we're now in the present day, and she is now telling her story to this reporter, saying, I have handpicked you, I'm going to tell you my story, and once I'm dead, you're going to publish it as my autobiography. And that's it. So throughout it, Evelyn is telling her story, and it's sort of like, it's told in 7 parts, each part chronologically, husband by husband. And it's all throughout, but all throughout it, we're also asking ourselves, well, and our reporter, who's the reporter again? Monique, is also asking herself, why me? Why is Evelyn telling it specifically to Monique? Because there's a connection there. Evelyn knows what that connection is, obviously. As the reader, we haven't got a clue, and Monique has no clue. And as you're reading it, literally the entire way through, you're like, I still don't understand where this connection is coming from. So you're constantly trying to piece that together. What can I say? The very first chapter is told from Monique's point of view, where she has gotten that call, where her editor's gotten that call and is like, she's chosen you, go deal with this. And initially I was like, okay, if this is the writing, if this is the quality, I don't get the hype. Monique was not a character voice that Taylor Jenkins Reid was dedicated to. It was... Her chapters are definitely the smaller chapters. The vast majority of this comes from Evelyn, and you can tell that all the time and effort went into Evelyn's voice. And I'm okay with that, because once we got in, like, the minute, like, that first couple of pages of Evelyn telling the story, and it is told first person from Evelyn, so you are fully hearing her voice, which is this is incredibly realised, just so well. The character is just sculpted so incredibly well. You are captivated. At one point I was asking myself, am I in love with Evelyn or do I want to be Evelyn? The answer was probably both, because Evelyn is just such this incredible character. She goes through so much. Like, she has the roughest start in life. She learns from a very, very early age that the only person looking out for Evelyn is Evelyn. And you know what? She has the balls and confidence to look out for herself. She has the gumption to just be like, I know what I need to do and I am willing to do it. I don't care who gets in my way. I will take them out. I will use and manipulate and, you know, bite my eyelashes if I need to. I'll marry this guy to get to where I need to go. And she's unapologetic about it. And I absolutely love that. Because Evelyn is not a bad person. She's not necessarily a good person, but she's not a bad person. She's just a person. And that's what I love about it. She's not like super idealized or romanticized. She just is. And I have not done this description justice, but I absolutely adored this. Absolutely go look up a whole bunch of other reviews for it if you're even remotely interested, because other people will describe it better and give you better ideas of what this is about. All I can say is I absolutely adored this. If you want a purely character focused narrative, it's not necessarily like a lot happens in this book and it is quite fast paced. And Evelyn has had like this incredible, very full life. It's not like a, you know, it's there's not long stretches of time where very little happens. Like there's always something going on in her life. But the focus is more specifically on Evelyn and who she is, and the great love of her life. It's not really a spoiler to say that Evelyn, although it's called The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, they are not the focus. Very, very early on, Monique actually asks Evelyn, you know, which of the husbands was the great love of your life? And she's like, you shouldn't be asking me which of my husbands it was. No, by the end of this book, no one's going to care about the husbands, and they're going to care about my wife. Which, okay, we're gonna pop, we're gonna stop, we're gonna move on, because let's just, like, I loved it. It was brilliant. It's gonna be a really hard book to beat just the entire rest of the year. But anyways, after that, I was like, I didn't know what I wanted to read, honestly, because that was so good, but I knew I was going to need something a bit different. And I'd gone to the library and I'd given a couple of books back, and I saw one. I had been meaning to pick up a John Scalzi. Specifically, I really wanted to pick up Starter Villain, purely because of the cover. This is the cover. Look at that cover and tell me you don't want to read it. Okay? My library doesn't have this book, though. My library does not have Starter Villain. What it does have is the Kaiju Preservation Society. Okay, this was a really good, really fun introduction to John Scalzi. If this is any indication of what the rest of his books are like in terms of humour and writing style and character work, I'm here for it. I absolutely want to read so much more of his works. The Kaiju Preservation Society is, we basically follow our main character who, right at the start of the COVID pandemic, he is working for a food delivery company startup in New York, and gets laid off. And he was working sort of like in the offices and like development and marketing and things. But it's right at the start of the pandemic, right at the start of lockdown. There are no other jobs to be had. So he ends up working for them as a delivery person. Now, no dissing to delivery people is a very valid job. I personally support them often enough. I am very, very grateful for them. Possibly too grateful. I definitely need to give them less money this year. Which I have been, thankfully. Go me. But it is not where he wanted to be. It is a not nearly not nearly as appreciated a job, and it is definitely not nearly as well paid. He is I say like he's barely making rent, he's kind of not making rent. He finds himself in a really, really tough situation. And yeah, during one of his deliveries, I think it's like his last delivery of the night, so he chops on the door, and the guy who opens it and takes the food is like, hold on a second, I know you. Like, I used to date your roommate or something like that. Like, they knew each other from uni, but they were like friends of friends, like in the periphery. And it turns out that this guy who he's delivering food to, he actually works for a conservation society, and they look after what they describe as big animals. But here's the thing: they're shipping out in a couple of days, and a member of their team is pulled out for reasons. But they can't ship out without someone else, so they kind of need someone to just bump up the numbers. No, you wouldn't have to be involved in the actual conservation. You don't need like a degree or anything. You'd essentially be like a handyman. You'd basically be there to lift things, to pick the big things, to pick things up, you know. Our main character's like, well, you know, I literally have nothing to lose, so sure, why not? Only here's the thing, and he goes through all the checks and signs everything and all that, and he's hired. Excellent. But the thing is that they are a conservation society, and they do look after big animals. It's just that the big animals, you know, he thought it was maybe going to be like pandas or elephants. It's kaiju. He now looks after Godzilla and all of Godzilla's mates and friends in an alternate Earth. In another dimension. They literally have to go through a portal. And it is hilarious. And it is so much fun. It absolutely does not take itself seriously at all. You go into this book just looking for a good time, and you get that. And it delivers on everything it needs to. 100% recommend it. I did recommend it to another friend. I recommended it to Rachel and her husband Matt. They have both listened to it. So I read the physical copy. They listened. They read the audio. I think it's narrated by Will Wheaton, and they say like the audio was also top notch. They have already finished it as well. Also equally had a really good time, and now we are looking into, you know, maybe we want to read something else by him. So I have actually downloaded Starter Villain on audio. So next wrap up, expect, like it's a preview and spoiler of next wrap up, expect me to talk about Starter Villain by John Scalzi. I'm very excited for it. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. After that, I picked up Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. Yes, this is the right order. This was the January book club pick for Chloe Frizzle's book club. It's one that I've had my eye on for a while. I did buy this just this year, this month. I had vouchers for Waterstones and points on my card, so I figured, you know, why not just pick up a physical copy. I was fairly certain I was going to enjoy this anyway, and I did. I had a really good time with this one. This is centered around a world where, so our main character Sayona is at the start, it starts with her sort of like, she's away to take an exam to become a high mage. But until now there has never been a female high mage. It's a very sexist, male-driven society. But once every 10 years, women are allowed to take it and see if they can pass the exam. And naturally she does. Yeah. She is then partnered up with Thommel. Thommel is of the Quen. he is of a race who have come from some like out with the city barriers, from sort of like kind of like a wasteland type area land. Where he comes from, the land is stricken by a blight. And it's an unusual blight. It's not a everyone dying of disease type blight. It's a, unfortunately, fairly regularly, people die horrifically. Horrifically. This just a bunch of light appears and will literally just disintegrate them or strip them of their flesh, and it's the first chapter describes them coming from the wasteland into the city, and it is more graphic than I anticipated it being. Not overly so, but enough that you're like, whoa, that's pretty bad. So yeah, but once they make it into the city, the Quen are very much treated as not even second-class citizens, very much. Only a little bit better than animals, but even that's debatable. They get the worst of the worst jobs. You know, they're severely underpaid. It's a really shit lot, you know. Especially what they go through to get there. It's just terrible. So he's working as a janitor in the university. And he gets assigned to Sayona to be her assistant because obviously all of the guys are generic pricks. And, you know, no one wants to be her assistant or sign up with her. Yeah. I don't think that tells you much about what the plot's about though, does it? So basically it's a magic system that centers around typewriters, which is quite cool, and it's very inspired by coding. Pretty much everything in the city is driven by magic. The electricity, the street lamps, everything is magic driven. All of the modcons. All entirely magic driven. But they're kind of having a problem is the magic needs to be siphoned from somewhere, from something. And they are looking to not so they need more magic basically, and they're looking to expand the barriers which protect the city from the blight. So that's kind of what Sayona is assigned to study. I had words. Here's the thing, I don't script these, you've noticed this by now, I do not script these videos, but I do think about what I want to say, and I will for like an hour or two before I start filming. I will just like be making a cup of tea, telling the kettle about this book. So I've told my kettle about this book, and I also told the oven as I was getting my dinner out about this book. I've told many inanimate objects about this book, but when I go to tell you about the book, we go out there. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's it. I really enjoyed it. I had a really good time. My initial rating when I finished this book was sort of 5 stars. We did have the book club yesterday, and it has now been about 2 weeks or so since I have finished this. So on reflection, it is probably closer to a 4 star. Just because there are a couple of things where it's like, actually, you know, on reflection, that could have been done better. That wasn't quite as satisfying. Our main characters are really well fleshed out. Their friendship is beautiful. I absolutely adore their friendship. And some of the conversations and the banter and the debates they have over sort of like philosophy and religion, incredible. The world building, to an extent, is really good. The magic system is, I mean, it's hard to say. In some ways it's really unique, and in other ways you're like, I mean, it kind of makes sense. It feels familiar in some ways. But still a really intriguing magic system, and I mean, always got to appreciate a magic typewriter, don't we? And yet the plotting, and I like what the author did with it. Some executions, particularly towards the climax, they just... This was originally self-published and has recently, is in sort of like in the last 6 months or so, been picked up by a trad publisher, by Del... Yeah. It's now being published by Del Rey. I think it could have done with the developmental editing could have been tighter. There are just a couple of things where it's like the execution wasn't ideal. Yeah. But overall, I had a really, really good time with this one. So, do highly recommend. Within the Discord, this is probably in sort of like, especially within the last few months in terms of book club picks, this is the one where we've had like a lot of different recommendations for if you liked this, what else would you recommend? My personal recommendation is if you like this, absolutely pick up the Black Magician trilogy by Trudy Canavan. I think it handles a lot of similar topics. But likewise, if you don't know if you want to pick this up or not and you have read the Black Magician trilogy and you enjoyed that, there's a good chance you're going to enjoy this. I feel like the writing was very similar. The main characters and just a number of the character interactions felt very similar. But not in the they're copying, one is copying the other or anything like that. But just in that sort of like, you know, if one resonated, I think the other will. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna move on. After I finished that, again, I was like, okay, I think I want something a little bit different, because I'm on a roll. So let's just keep going. I picked up Earthlings by Sayaka Murata, which I'm going to pop up here. I did have a physical copy. I have since donated my physical copy. I DNF'd this one. I DNF'd it about 25% of the way in. So Earthlings is basically about this little girl who is convinced she is an alien, that she doesn't fit in with her family, and she doesn't really fit in with society. She's always felt different and other. And she is convinced that one day her true family, her alien family, will come back and she can then return to her home planet. It's interesting. I really enjoy going into books not knowing too much about them. I feel like the more I know about a book, the more I anticipate whether or not I'm going to enjoy with it, and that can put pressure on. But if you go into a book having absolutely no clue what to expect, there's no pressure. Unfortunately, that backfired on me at this point, because my biggest caution to anyone is that if you want to give this book a try, go have a look, see what it's about. Not necessarily to like spoiler extent, but get an idea of what the reviews are saying, and very importantly, go have a look at the trigger and content warnings. I generally don't bother looking at content or trigger warnings because very little triggers me. I really wish I had read them. This, in terms of content warnings, you name it, this book has it. It's, objectively, it's very well written. And character work is really good. From the 25% or so that I read, nothing was romanticized. I really need to emphasize that at no point did the author ever treat anything that was, horrific and traumatic as okay or good. We follow a main character who a lot of really crap things happen to her, especially very early on. I did not like, our main character is still a child when I DNF'd it. And yeah, she is being neglected, abused, sexually abused. It's not comfortable or easy reading. Our main character doesn't really recognize that these are not okay things. Every time her mother is horrific to her, she is excusing it, being like, yeah, no, it's just because, like, I get it, like, that's my purpose in life, is to be her, is to, be the slapping post, or, my purpose in life is to be this thing for her to vent at or take her rage out on. It's like, no. So I have to say, I do appreciate the way the author handled it, in that although it's told first person and our main character does not recognize that these are bad, horrible things happening to her, as the reader, you know that they are terrible, bad, horrible things that are happening to her. And there is never a time where I felt reading it going, we're supposed to just be okay with this. At no point does it feel like that. I'm sort of like torn. In some ways I want to know where this book is going, and does our main character ever sort of like come to terms with everything that's happened to her? Does she ever find peace in her life? There's this feeling of being different. Does she ever accept herself? However, having read a lot more reviews, and I've read quite a few reviews about this since, and just seen like, okay, I know what content warnings I have from the little bit I read. The list is closer to Linda's size. It's, yeah, like I said, you name it, this book has that content warning. And just seeing that, I'm like, I don't want to know that bad, because it's not even that we're told these things are happening, we are shown that these things are happening. And yeah, at one point I was feeling nauseous about this and what I was reading, so I was like, okay, no, I can understand why. I don't want to say it's hyped, but it's definitely, I've seen this book around a lot, and it does get a lot of praise. It's not a book you enjoy, but it is a book that I can see why people appreciate it and why they rate it so highly. It definitely gets you thinking, but it's just not for me. So yeah, that was kind of a disappointment, but I'm glad I gave it a shot and was very proud of myself for just going, actually, you know what, nope. Yes, I bought this book and I own a physical copy, but no. Life is too short and we're having way too much fun in terms of all the rest of my reading that we're not, you know what, no. I don't want to give a book a bad review when it's not a bad book just because it's not gelling with me. So it's a DNF for me. This book did not work for me. It's not for me. Not that any of the content warnings were being handled terribly. It's just that I don't want to read about them. And that's what it came down to. So yeah, by the time I DNF'd that one though, I only had sort of like 3 or 4 days before an anticipated pre-order came out and arrived and was delivered to my door. So what I thought is, I was also in the middle of editing my last video, which was my trying to finish books that I'd already started. So I figured, why don't I pick one of those up? That just makes sense, right? We can finish the book we've started, and it's another one off the physical TBR. So, I picked up A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. This follows Effie, who... So this is set in... Although it's set in a different world, this is basically set in our world, just everything is called different. Places have different names. But it's basically it's Earth. It's our world. And I would say in sort of like the 1940s, 50s inspired era-ish. But this is basically about Effie, who is at university. She is a student of architecture. What she really wants to be is a student of literature, but because of sexist reasons, women aren't allowed in the literature department. She enters and wins a competition to redesign and renovate the house of the late Emrys Myrddin, of Myrddin. I'm not Welsh, I do not know how to pronounce this properly. I appreciate that I just butchered it, but there you go. Emrys Myrddin. Myrddin. Merlin. Although it's not outright said that it's Merlin, let's face it, anyone who's familiar with Arthurian legends knows that that's one of the ways Merlin was referred to. But yeah, Emrys Myrddin was this country's one of their greatest novelists, authors. He recently passed away sort of like within the last year and has for all intent and purposes just been made a saint. So there's a massive legacy behind his name. So Effie gets to travel to his house down at the bottom 100 to basically come up with a new design to renovate and bring a bit more life to it, because it has been severely neglected and needs a lot of TLC. And when she's there, she comes across and cross paths and spends a lot of time with another student, Preston. He is there on the pretext of gathering and cataloguing all of Emrys's documents and whatnot, to, be either published or taken back to the university and popped in the museum. But what he's actually trying to do is find evidence of whether or not Emrys Myrddin was a fraud, because he is convinced that Emrys did not actually write his great novel that got him all the fame. Here's the thing, Effie is a massive fan of Emrys. So they obviously are a bit of loggerheads, but eventually start working together because, at the end of the day, she wants to know the truth. But also throughout all of this, since her childhood, Effie has been plagued by these visions of the Fairy King, at which point she is being medicated to help stop the dreams and things. So we've got all of sort of like, and he's starting to appear to her more frequently now. So that's all in the background. And I don't really want to say too much more about this, because we obviously get into spoiler territory and I don't want to just tell you the entire book. From picking it up, I think I'm starting to understand why I had such an easy time putting it down. By no means did I dislike this book. I did actually really enjoy this book. It's just... It's interesting. We talk about like middle book syndrome, either be it sort of like a second book in a trilogy or the literal middle of a book, where a book will sort of like start off really good, it kind of dip, slow down a bit, and then, get better towards the end. This book almost had the opposite effect, where it started off it was fine. I really enjoyed sort of like the middle sections where we're spending a lot of time in the house. The atmosphere is like this. If you like that sort of slightly more gothic, darker atmosphere that's a bit creepier, it's obviously they're together in this house in not quite the middle of nowhere, but in a very rural coastal setting, quite isolated. We got this. It's perfect. Really, really enjoyed that. But by the time we got towards the end, when we're trying to wrap up and come to conclusions, the pacing went a bit off. It just wraps up a bit too quickly. It was just a bit too, okay. Like, in some ways I'm not surprised, but in other ways, like, that came out of nowhere. There is a certain aspect, particularly around the Fairy King, because obviously Effie's seeing these visions of him. Quite frankly, I don't think it was needed. I don't actually think it added anything to the story. I think it actually possibly would have been much more satisfying. I feel like Ava Reid wanted to write a fantasy romance. I know she has written other fantasy romances, so I think that's where her comfort zone is. But honestly, this should have just been straight up historical. Set it in our world. Don't make it Emerus. Because other than the name, like, no, there's not really any other connection to Arthurian legend. But because of the name, I kept expecting there to be. I kept expecting at least like the name Merlin to come up, and it doesn't. So I'm just gonna give that to you. So yeah, I had a good time with this. I'm glad I finished it. It just, you know, there are things I would have preferred to have gone differently. A sequel to this has just been announced. I think it's not that it's just been announced. I think it comes out quite soon. I've seen a couple of folk talking about having arcs of it, and yeah, I'm not going to run out and grab a copy anytime soon. I'm not sure I'll ever read. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think a sequel is needed. I really don't think it's needed. This works really well as a standalone, and I'm quite content to leave it as a standalone. So yeah, that was that one. But I finished that one. And then, I told you, I picked that up because I was waiting for a pre-release to come out. And it came out. Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. I started January with a 5-star read, and I finished January with a 5-star read. I really, really, really enjoyed this. Where Iron Flame fell down a little bit, the characters, you know, they weren't perfect. There was issues with Iron Flame, which was book 2, which ultimately could be put down to the fact that the publication was rushed. None of it in here. You can tell that because Rebecca had that little bit more time, there wasn't like this rush to get it out. She had time. Everything just felt just that bit neater, that bit tidier, and just that bit better overall. With a lot more focus on the world building in this one, particularly on the physical world. The characters, just especially Violet and Xaden, were perfect. I am currently in the middle of filming a vlog where I am reading anticipated books, particularly anticipate new releases. This was the first one I read for it, so I won't say too much other than I had such a good, excellent time with this one. And I don't want to say too much about what the book is about because it is book 3. And if you do want to know more about this, I've watched at least 3 spoiler reaction videos. Like, they're out there. Interesting. I'm making a video about the books I read, and I'm telling you to go watch someone else talk about them rather than me, but you know, that's where we are. Yeah, any gripes I had with book 2, nope. Certain characters are very annoying in book 2, much less so in this one. Everyone has sort of like, they've all grown up a bit at this point. It's not that time has passed, but it's all, we've had that realization, okay, right, you know, fun time's over, like playtime's over, we need to, yeah, it's not a game anymore. It was never a game, but it's like, you know, like shit got real, so we need to start treating it like it's real. And you know, big boy pants have been pulled up, big girl pants have been pulled up, and we're kind of getting on with things now. And I think, yeah, I had a really, really good time with this one. So this video is almost an hour long, which is a lot longer than I anticipated. I was hoping to film and edit tonight, but I think I will film it tonight and maybe edit it tomorrow instead. But yes, thank you for bearing with me this long. I very much appreciate it. Yeah, I think I had more fun talking about the books this way than through a vlog, so we will definitely continue something similar to this. Again, like I said, whether it is monthly or just here are the last 5 books I read, we'll see. But yeah, in the meantime, I hope you guys have had a wonderful start to the year, and I will see you guys in the next video.